Welcome back, everybody, to Creating Communities for Neurodivergent People. This is a place where we develop a social community, a residential community, and an employment community for neurodivergent people after graduation from high school. Today, we're going to focus on employment, both for the neurodivergent employee and what we call the inclusive employer. And let me tell you, I have lots of respect for the employers who are very open to hiring neurodivergent people and are just looking for the right tools to use. These people are worth their weight in gold. And here's who else is worth their weight in gold. Our guest today, Kate Broeking, herself a neurodivergent person who has a company called Thynk Stack, a women-owned and disability-owned business designed to do two things: help employers create workplaces where every employee thrives, and coaching for the neurodivergent employees struggling to fit into the workflow, production expectation, and possibly with other employees. Kate, did I describe your company correctly?
Yeah, that's a great description. Thank you.
You're welcome. I got it from your website and then enhanced it a little bit. Let's start with you. What is your disability?
Yeah, so my disability is I live with treatment-resistant depression that I've had for about since I was a teenager, actually was when I was diagnosed. I also have generalized anxiety disorder, which tends to show up in really fun and interesting ways at work, especially in like high stress meetings or anywhere where I feel like I'm under pressure. It's something that I do have a lot of tools to manage now. But it took a long time to get those tools in place and to figure out what worked for me.
Can you give us a for instance of being in a meeting, high stress? What happens? What do you do?
Absolutely. I remember the first time I had a panic attack in a meeting, I was invited to a board of directors meeting for my company for the first time. And just the title of board of directors intimidated me, which is funny because now I'm on a board of directors. Um, but we were all just going around to give our name and share a little bit about what we do for the company. And I just remember I almost like I didn't quite black out, but I almost I felt like I was going to pass out. And I was able to get my words out, but after that I had to excuse myself because I was so dizzy. And then I finally realized what I had just experienced was a panic attack. And anybody who has had that happen knows that once you have one, it can be really easy to have more, right? And so
Yep.
after that, I started having panic attacks in regular meetings or meetings that, I felt pretty equipped to handle. And so then it felt like it was coming out of nowhere. And so if I hadn't gotten the right tools in place, I can tell you, I never would have joined the corporate world. I never would have been able to launch my career the way that I did.
Well,
Um,
this is probably what you do in your coaching. So give me a tool. This is fascinating that you would use to mitigate the panic attack.
Yeah, so for me, the first tool that I had was, of course, therapy. So just getting the diagnosis. I went to a therapist and said, "Hey, what is going on?" And got diagnosed with anxiety. And once I had a label for it, then there's a path for it, right? So some people, they might have an inclination to avoid getting a diagnosis or avoid a label. But I
Mhm.
think in these situations, it's really helpful because then I had a path forward. I could explore like medication. I could explore different ways of over preparing for meetings, even when I wasn't stressed about them. And so now I still use those tools to this day. So I use a combination of medication. I over prepare for meetings that I feel are going to cause even a little bit of stress. And all of that preparation just helps me go in and feel totally equipped, totally calm, like I have my recipe.
Okay, this sounds great because first of all, I've had a couple panic attacks, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and so many people have had them. You have no clue what's happening. You
Mhm.
think you're having a heart attack, you need to go to the emergency room, and then the paramedics come and they're like, "Well, no, you're just having a panic attack. Calm down." Okay, how do you calm down? I'd love to be
Yeah.
able to calm down if I could, right? And
Yep.
then the labeling, what you said about labeling, I loved it because people do have an aversion to labeling. They think it makes you judgmental, right?
Hmm.
Or condescending, or you put people in a little hole, a
Yeah.
little box, and you diminish them. No, it allows you to function and
Yes.
address. Say more about that, the label.
Yeah. So it allows you to access resources too. So I work with so many employees who let's give it an example of like female employees who are in their 40s going through perimenopause or menopause, and they're getting diagnosed with ADHD for the first time and then coming to me. And they're telling me their journey was I knew I was dealing with menopause. I was dealing with symptoms where I felt like I was going crazy. My brain wasn't working the right way, or the way that it used to. But they internalized all of that experience, thinking that there was something wrong with them, thinking that they just weren't trying hard enough at work or they just weren't disciplined enough. And then once they started getting support for it, and then perhaps got like an ADHD diagnosis from that support journey, everything fell into place for them. And they say, like, oh, now there's so much about my entire life that I look back and it makes sense. Like, it wasn't that I was lazy. Like, this was something that I've been struggling with and I didn't have the right support for it. So I think it can be very empowering in that way.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I love that. Now, let me ask you about, I'm going to ask about the types of individuals that you work with and then the employers. So let's talk about the neurodivergent individuals. What is the broad range of profile of the people that come to you, the employees?
Yeah, I would say the general profile are a lot of folks in the tech space, like software developers, app developers, um, and people who um, have been diagnosed with some sort of neurodivergence, maybe in the last 10 years, sometimes in the last year or so. And they have been used to being maybe like the smartest person in the room a lot of the time, or the person who comes up with all of these great ideas or sees problems around corners that nobody else on their team does, like classic high achievers. And then they reach a point in their career or in their work environment where their systems that were helping them be successful before are no longer working. And they're realizing that the executive function challenges are like becoming overpowering for them. So what that looks like is people will say, you know, I've always been a high achieving. That's why I am where I am in my career. But then recently I've just been falling behind on my deadlines and notice that I just can't keep up with work. I will hyper focus for 12 hours one night and then need to take the next day off as a mental health day to recover from it. So it's people who are meeting their deadlines potentially, but are doing it at the expense of their health.
Okay, but thank you for that. What are their range of neurodiversity
Oh, sure.
aspects?
Yeah, so I would say about 70% of the folks we work with have ADHD. After that, autism is the next biggest population, and co-occurring like ADHD, AUDHD, people with autism and ADHD.
Ah, okay. I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, ADHD. And a lot of folks with different like mental health conditions. So we see a lot of depression and anxiety, a lot of OCD, bipolar disorder, um, and also learning disabilities as well. So things like dyslexia or dyscalculia, dysgraphia. Those are things that people can find ways to manage throughout their career, and then maybe they go into a job where they have to do more reading or more writing, and boom, it shows up in a way that it hasn't showed up since college.
Did you happen to know that Richard Branson is uh I just lost the word when
Oh,
words are
dyslexic?
yes, thank you. You just said it. Yeah,
Yeah,
he was. I read he had this article on LinkedIn and I'm like, "Oh my God." So, now there's somebody that we all know that managed that, which can be debilitating.
absolutely. And it goes to show how many like really, really successful entrepreneurs and just thought leaders in every space imaginable have like there tends to be a lot of neurodivergence in that space.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap because with dyslexia comes a lot of creative thinking. With ADHD comes a lot of ideas and a lot of
Yeah.
ways of fixing problems that maybe somebody who's neurotypical wouldn't see.
Absolutely. And you know what I just saw over the weekend? It was a film, a documentary on HBO. Well, a film, not a documentary, on Temple Grandin.
Oh, great. Yep, I'm right down the street from her in
Are you really?
Colorado. Yes.
God, I would love to speak with her. So, Temple Grandin, for anybody who doesn't know, is an autist. She was diagnosed, I think, with ADHD, depression, or something first. And then I think in high school, definitely college, autism was diagnosed. But she, because of her autism and what you just said, Kate, sometimes people see things that the typical person doesn't see. They just have a different way of looking at life and problems. And so she introduced to the cattle industry a humane way of killing cattle. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but no, because of her
Yeah.
brain, she developed this maze that cattles go in that actually calms them down.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it's
Yeah, she's done some amazing research work. And I think, again, that's just a testament to how um, when we have diversity of thought and perspectives, that's always going to be better than if we have kind of one cognitive profile on a team.
absolutely. So let's talk about the employer a second.
Yeah.
What size companies do you work with?
So right now we work with all sizes. So I will say I started my corporate career at Amazon, which is of course a very
Giant.
large size employer. But that was great because then we were able to test our program on basically every job family, every job role imaginable, right? So now we work with companies typically around like I would say 5,000 to 20,000 range. But it shifts. We work with smaller companies all the time who maybe don't have even employee resource groups set up or don't have an accommodations process, all the way to companies like Amazon who have a 300-person accommodation team and robust resources and everything you could imagine.
And with these large companies, you work with the human resources department, right?
Yes.
And I read that you create seminars, um, strategic thinking meetings. Say what you do because they're specifically designed to the needs of that company.
Yes, absolutely. So we found that there's a lot of pain points for HR, talent acquisition leaders who don't know much about neurodiversity. And they're just now starting to see more employees disclose and request support. So a lot of that is because we have a younger workforce that's now entering who had IEPs in high school and accommodations in college, and now they're entering the workforce and they're asking, hey, what kind of support do you provide for ADHD? So we do a few things. We help employers who maybe don't have an accommodation program build out a program from end to end. For employers that do have an accommodation program that's maybe more focused on like physical disabilities, we can audit their process and optimize it for neurodiversity and behavioral health conditions. And then we found that a lot of these teams, they just need to be upskilled. They don't know the language to use. They don't know what trends are happening in the workforce. So we kind of equip them with like the foundational knowledge that they need to interact well with their own employees. and then get them started on their neurodiversity journey, whatever that looks like.
Okay, so you said a couple things that I want to circle back to. And one is the younger generation is more vocal about what
Yes.
they need, more vocal about defining themselves. Hey, by the way, I have, and what do you have for me that could be helpful so that we could be productive together, right?
Yes.
I think this is really helpful. This is the new day. This is when younger people who, I guess through social media, just through acceptance.
Hmm. Yeah, and for the supports that are in place in the school system. So that's where a lot of it starts now is not only are people getting diagnosed younger, and there's more like early intervention programs that are usually available for free now because they're federally funded. So kids are getting diagnosed younger, which means that the schools and preschools even are creating more programs and more support. And so luckily that's been happening for at least a few decades now. So that first generation is now graduating and entering the workforce at a time where we're just in general like more open about talking about mental health. I think in our just our everyday culture. But they're bringing that culture, that Gen Z culture, to the employer, and they're talking about it in their team meetings for the first time. Something that you never saw maybe even 10 or 15 years ago.
Right. And towards that end, you have older employees who may have been reluctant to talk about, their neurodiversity. And this then allows them more inclusion.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things a company or an employer can do is to start building employee resource groups. And companies might start off with like a disability employee resource group. But then we're starting to see offshoots of that to mental health employee resource group and neurodiversity employee resource groups. And sometimes this is as casual as just a chat in a Slack channel. And sometimes it's as formal, like the one at Amazon, where, it hosted annual events, conferences, meetings, all sorts of stuff. And I think that one has grown to like 10,000 employees. But when you give employees a chance to talk about their, like a safe place to talk
Yeah.
about their shared experience, that's when all of this really blossoms because people realize they're not alone and they start to learn from each other. Like, oh, I have ADHD too. Like, how do you manage this? And they become more empowered, even just watching other people's conversations.
This is so beautiful the way this is all coming together, because it was so stigmatized and not clear, what's going on with people. They're just weird. That's
Yeah,
how people would talk. They're just, well, okay, so aren't we all to a certain degree weird?
I hope so.
A lot of
Yeah,
comfort in that.
and then we talk about, with the word disability, we have invisible disabilities, which has become like a much more common phrase over the last 10 years, where, it's a disability that is not readily apparent. It's not obvious. And so with mental health conditions or neurodiversity, many people mask. And I think that's been kind of the go-to and for the last 50, 60 years
Yep.
is people have these conditions but they're masking to try to fit in to
Yeah.
the neurotypical expressions of success in the workplace. And so now people are taking off their mask entirely or starting to peek out from the mask a little bit, um, and feel safe that they can be authentic at work.
Because when you're authentic, you are productive. And when
Yes,
you are productive, you are happy. And when you are happy, you fit in.
absolutely. Yep, that's a
No,
beautiful way of putting it.
very, very nice. Now, I know I had asked you this before when we just met and we're talking, and I did do an interview with a woman about 3 months ago. It's already posted. Amy Lightholder. She works in the tech field, or did
Mm.
work in the tech field. Now she's a coach for people. But she introduced to me what is called the Agile method.
Mhm.
And that means you can be in a large company, but you work in small groups. And what's the benefit of working in small groups, Kate?
Yeah, so with those small groups, people have the ability to form relationships and to learn how each other may work best, right? So, like, I've worked with so many employees who maybe have anxiety or autism, and they work in these giant teams where the people they contact are just an email address. They don't know anything about this person. And
Mm.
it makes it really intimidating to reach out and ask for help or clarification. It adds another layer of like stress to their work. Whereas on those small teams, you get to know each other and understand each other's communication preferences, working preferences. It's usually a lot safer to disclose your own preferences, like, hey, it's really helpful for me if we screen share during meetings so I can see what we're looking at. And then the team just learns that instead of having to repeat it for every single meeting and do that constant self-advocacy, which we all know can be totally exhausting. So the small teams allows takes away some of that cognitive load as well.
And also, my thinking is when you're working in a small team, you can be more creative because you're
Mm.
relaxed, you feel included, you feel accepted, you feel accepted. And then when you feel accepted, you can be more creative and no holds barred on ideas that you would contribute. Do you find that to be the case?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, when you're on a smaller team, you feel safer, again, being your authentic self and sharing your ideas and speaking up and saying, like, hey, I think I have a better way to do this, or hey, have we ever thought about this? Especially if, that team is meeting regularly or having ways to connect either virtually or through meetings. It's way easier to throw out those suggestions to people you know and trust than, again, just some random email address on, a huge email chain with 20 people on it.
Is it a hard sell to employers to talk to you, to be open to your ideas with this community, the neurodivergent community? How?
That's a great question. And I would say no. We're pretty lucky in that we haven't had to do much marketing for our company because people find us. So um, what we're finding is companies are already seeing these issues crop up. They're seeing their neurodivergent employees ask for or demand more support and more help in the workplace. And so then they're seeking out resources as a reaction to that. Other companies we're seeing, they're just starting to see some of the statistics that are coming out and realizing that they need to kind of get ready for the future of work because I think the last study was 53% of Gen Z identifies as neurodivergent. Um, and then we're seeing that impact employers in not just disclosure rates, but accommodation requests, and then ultimately like leave requests as well, because some employees may get burnt out if they're not supported properly. And then they have to take a medical leave. So we're seeing a huge rise in leave claims for behavioral health and neurodivergent conditions.
And it's really up to the employee, the individual, to explain who they are and what they need, because I don't think corporations can ask these questions, right?
No, they can, so yeah, ADHD, autism, depression, anxiety, those are considered ADA covered disabilities,
Mhm.
which means an employer cannot assume disability. They cannot assume that somebody has a medical condition and treat them that way. Um, but what a lot of people don't know is that by telling their manager, like, hey, I have ADHD and I've been struggling lately, that is actually considered a formal disclosure to an employer, which the way that we want to see it work is then in order for them to be compliant, they would start the interactive process for accommodations. We're seeing a huge gap there that's leading to a lot of lawsuits and a lot of frustration, of course, where employers or employees are disclosing, but the managers aren't trained to respond to it. So they might respond in like an empathetic way, but they don't point that employee to accommodations or extra supports, which is what they need to do.
Okay, and that's where you come in. That's where
Yes.
ThynkStack comes in. All right, let's go to the employee now a second in a different way. I wondered when I was preparing to speak with you, do you do you talk to employees that need help um, functioning better at work? And if you see that maybe the employee isn't at the right company, isn't
Mhm.
doing the right job, are you in the position of saying, can we talk about maybe some other options in terms of work for you?
Yeah, so that's where it really gets interesting. That's the word that I like to use. It can get pretty complicated because if an employer is paying for a service as an accommodation,
Oh my.
then our function in that space is to help the employee perform in their current role. Um, However, sometimes there are cases where, due to the nature of somebody's condition, um, there aren't going to be accommodations that can support that person in that role. So then we might look at recommending like reassignment as an accommodation. But that's a whole very complicated area and usually a last resort. Um, However, when employees work with us one-on-one, because we do have employees who just reach out to us for our coaching support, then we can look at their entire environment, right? And we can say, hey, what challenges are you experiencing in this environment that maybe you wouldn't get in another environment? And help them talk through that consideration.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up both sides of the coin because when I thought about asking you this question, it didn't occur to me that if the employer is paying you to help redesign their workplace to accommodate neurodivergency, you really do have to support the employer and not recommend the employee look elsewhere. But if an employee, a person comes to you employed at some other company that you're not working with, you then have free reign to really look at where the type of company, the type of environment that they might have a better fit in.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we can add a lot of value because I may have worked with hundreds of people with the job title of software developer. But all of those people have completely different job roles and expectations and challenges. And so you can have that title in any size company and the job can completely change, whether you're working with like internal stakeholders, external customers. There are so many factors that can make that job much easier for you and fall within your strengths or much more challenging and create a lot more stress, right? So we help people think through like what are the day-to-day things in their work that make life easier or make life more challenging.
So, Kate, I met you through another organization called Intensity Hub,
Yes.
run by Megan Bondi, who I've already interviewed on this show and posted her interview. And I love her. I love everything she's doing. Her whole thrust is work the way you're wired.
Mhm.
Don't force yourself to work in a way that doesn't work for you. And her biggest thrust, which I was really surprised about, was showing people how to go into business for themselves.
Yeah.
And that may be the better way for somebody. And I never really thought about that. So, where do you also explore this option of possibly going into their own businesses?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Because the things that a lot of neurodivergent employees want is really just flexibility. Like that's what it comes down to is flexibility, like you said, to work the way that they're wired. Um, and sometimes you can't get that in a traditional work environment, or those jobs are really hard to find and really competitive, or they don't pay the rate that you're looking for. So that's when like going into your own business can open up a whole new world of ideas, right? Because you could do consulting, you could do all sorts of things that you're in control of that you can flex up and down, and you don't have to worry about being told no for it.
My nephew John, who I always
Hmm.
refer to, co-host, although he doesn't co-host every episode, but he's in the banner and he's done several episodes, very high rated episodes, mind you. He also was recognized at the mall a few weeks ago. John and his mother were at Barnes and Noble. She's sitting having coffee. He's, looking for books because he loves books. Not that he can read that well, but enough so that he can learn a little bit anyway. He brought something to his mother that she said, I'm sorry, it's just too expensive, because she's on a budget. So he went to put it back, and somebody walked up to him and said, Hey, you're John. I saw you on YouTube. Bought it for him.
Oh, oh my
Bought it for
gosh.
him. Now
That's
talk
amazing.
talk about inclusive. So I bring that up. That's a little sidebar. I bring that up because I think John should have his own business.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier, neurodivergence creates so many strengths in people. And it's something that if you can live and work in those strengths and in an environment that's flexible to those strengths, then you're going to thrive. You're going to succeed. And I think that's a great idea. That's also why even like the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, I know that's a mouthful, um, now has programs specifically for helping people with disabilities start their own business as well.
You're kidding.
No, it's
Say that
something that,
one, please say
yeah.
that one more time.
So Department of Vocational Rehabilitation,
Okay.
they're a government agency that helps people with disabilities find jobs and stay in jobs. They actually have programs now to help people start their own businesses because they recognize that so many people were thriving in that environment, and that they could, if they could help people like follow that path, then they would be successful. So that's something, if the government's recognizing it, then you know it's true by now.
Okay, so this is one of the best things that came out of this interview. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
everything was great about the interview, Kate, but just knowing this and for people to know this, because here's the deal. Let me just talk about skills and talents a second, and then you chime in on this. I've always believed that people should design their work lives based on their skills and talents that may not be recognizable as a traditional business skill and talent, but it's something that's needed and something that people will pay for. That's how you start, excuse me, sorry, hitting my microphone. That's how you start really creative businesses. So with John, and I'm saying this for all parents and individuals out there listening that need something left of center for them. John absolutely loves doing the laundry. Think
Mm-hmm.
about this a second. The thing we all least like, loves doing the laundry, separates whites and darks in different fabrics, does the ironing, folds as if he were working at the Gap. He's
Wow.
a master folder. He also loves elderly people, loves
Mhm.
senior citizens, goes out of his way to help senior citizens. So I'm thinking he should work at a senior living building complex, and there's a ton of them going up everywhere because
Mhm.
we're living longer, right?
Mhm.
And there's a point in time where physically we can't do our own laundry. And also, there are wealthy people who don't really have family but can afford to live in a better place and would love some companionship, people to come in and just talk to them while their laundry is being done.
Absolutely. I think
So,
that's a great idea. Yeah.
thank you. So, what John would need then is somebody to work with him to put a promotional flyer together. And anybody listening could do this with any skill and talent you have. Put a flyer together, and then he doesn't drive. So then
Mhm.
transportation would be necessary to go to the interviews, drop flyers off, because once the job, if it's a service job and you travel, well, you can get access,
Yeah.
lift, you can get transportation.
Yes. Um, sorry, that's a good point. I think a lot of people think the logistical barriers of
Mm,
starting your own business is enough of a blocker to not start. But everything that you mentioned, from transportation to growing a customer base and figuring out a routine, all of those are perfectly surmountable challenges, right? So don't let the logistics scare you away from starting.
absolutely. Because, everybody deals with that, with the logistics.
Yeah.
But all that's doable. But finding your right space, your right environment, the work that just makes you happy,
Mhm.
is the real deal. And then again, I love the employers who really want to reach out and help and just need help understanding how to help.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that there's so many like neurodiversity hiring programs that are coming out recently and over the last 10 years that it's not just something that companies are doing because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because it's good for their business also. And so they're recognizing that having diverse perspectives is good for their bottom line. And there's a lot of studies, a lot of evidence that supports that now.
Absolutely. And just in that Temple Grandin movie, she was trying to explain to the cattle ranchers how much money they would save if they would change the way they wrangle cattle. And they all paid attention. Eventually, they paid attention and she changed an industry like that.
Yep. Sets a new standard.
So, Kate, is there anything that you would like to say that you wanted to get across that I haven't asked you questions about?
I think the only message is that there are way more supports than you would usually think out there for whether you have a child with neurodivergence, whether you're neurodivergent yourself. Um, Sometimes it's an ask and you shall receive type situation of you don't know what's out there until you start to explore it. But there are a lot of groups, nonprofits, a lot of organizations that are out there to help people navigate every step of employment and neurodivergence.
Thank you for that. So, we will have show notes. We always have show notes. But if people would like to contact you for further information or to coach them, help guide people like to write things down. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes, so you can email me, kate@thinkstack.com, and we can make sure that that's in the show notes. And reach out for any questions about neurodiversity employment. I always say if I'm not the best resource, I will connect you to somebody else who is. So even if I don't end up being the best person to answer your question, I will work to get you to the right resource.
It's a you live and work with a very helpful community. I just love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Kate, thank you. I've learned a lot today. I appreciate you and everything that you're doing. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And for everybody watching, I end the same way. In the world of special needs, we all need each other. Talk to you next week.